Welcome to the Stanford MBA Two-Generational Wisdom Bridge across 30 years. I'm your host, Catherine Keogh McLennan from the MBA class of 1995 of Stanford. In each episode, I bring together one of my classmates, now in our 60s, give or take, and a member of the class of 2025, now in their 30s, give or take, and about to graduate into an entirely different world than we graduated in 1995. Back then, we finished our MBAs just as the internet was emerging. Today's grads are stepping into a future shaped by artificial intelligence, uncertainty, and we hope that we express possibility. These conversations bridge generations, share lessons, and spark reflections on leadership, life, and what's next. Let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by Carmen Gordon from the Stanford MBA class of 2025. Carmen is a second-year MBA student, originally from Spain, who previously worked in strategy consulting at McKinsey. She's driven by a passion for social impact and has worked in the Philippines, Malawi, and Colombia, focusing on socioeconomic empowerment. During her time at Stanford, Carmen co-founded a startup exploring how AI can support freelance fashion designers and spent the summer in India and Europe working with artisans and luxury brands to bridge cultures and commerce. This episode is bittersweet. It's the last one I'll record with a member of the class of 2025 before they graduate this coming weekend. And before I do a final wrap-up episode, reflecting on all 25 episodes, conversations I've had. I hope to continue the podcast in October with guests from the Stanford MBA class of 2026. And between now and October, I'll be sharing weekly some reflections on the research behind my upcoming book, The Leader's Choice in the AI World, Sinking into Inertia or Catalyzing Ingenuity. I'll speak more about that in the episode 26 of this series when I wrap up all the themes that came up through the last 25 conversations, which have been a real honor to be part of. In this conversation, though, Carmen and I reflect on the differences and surprising similarities between our MBA journeys 30 years apart. Carmen shares how technology is shaping the future of fashion and its supply chains, and how her work is driven by a deep personal mission to foster meaningful livelihoods for artisans. We explore what it means to define success on your own terms, the courage it takes to walk your own path, and why reconnecting to your roots can be the most powerful leadership choice of all. Okay, so we have Carmen Gordon, and just wondering, Carmen, where we find you today.
Well, I'm at the GSP in the Bass Library, and today is the last day of classes, so I am very excited to wrap this whole experience with this.
You guys are getting ready to graduate after 2 years of an MBA. What do you do for the next couple of weeks? Because you graduate on the 14th, is that right? 15th?
So we have this orientation week. Did you also have that?
I think so.
Oh, amazing.
I think so. I think it's like disorientation, right?
Yes, exactly.
Disintegration. So tell me about that. How do you wrap up 2 years in 10 days?
It is a hard thing. There's a lot of activities, but I think the whole idea is just like to reconnect with everyone. Everyone has been so busy in the last months, like recruiting or trying to figure out their lives. So we haven't seen each other as much as we used to. So this is just like 10 days full of pass down parties, last lectures by the best professors, or like, the last bike ride to Alice's, the last fountain hopping, and all these things that we used to do, especially at the beginning. So yeah, sad.
So it'll be interesting to say goodbye to people. I remember how emotional it was. So here you are, and at this point, it was an awkward question to say, so what are you doing next? And not everybody has plans. And Carmen, so you came from McKinsey.
Mm-hmm.
So Was it directly before business school that you were working for McKinsey? Tell us a little bit about that.
I only worked for a year and a half before coming here. I'm on the younger side of the class. Was working at McKinsey, as you said, in Spain. And I have decided to go back, mainly because I want to go back to Spain.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of job opportunities there that match what I want. But also, I was exploring. I think we talked about this before, but I was exploring startup idea with one of my classmates, and it has been like an amazing 2-year adventure. I loved it. It was basically AI for fashion designers, although right now it's only like for freelance designers. And my classmate is going to continue doing that, but I just like needed to go back to Spain. So hopefully in 2 years, when I pay back my sponsorship, I'll rejoin her. I don't know. But regardless, it's been such an amazing journey.
So you grew up in Spain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What part of Spain did you grow up in?
Madrid.
Okay. And is that where McKinsey office is that you're going to?
Yes, exactly.
Going back. Okay. That's my journey. So I worked for a consulting firm just like you. It sent me to business school and it paid my tuition. And then I came back and similarly, paid it off 3 years. So 1995, we graduated, which seems probably ancient to you, but yesterday to me. I graduated in 1995 and I went back to Sydney. So I didn't grow up in Sydney, but I had been there since the internet was just happening. And that's why I'm fascinated with your class as well, because like you, the internet was not like in terms of AI. So for us, it was the internet and it had just started really. Unlike AI, it was just literally coming on the horizon. We didn't understand it. It had existed for many years in the defense area of that, but it hadn't existed in a consumer sense. And so it literally launched when we graduated in the form of an internet service provider, ISP, called Netscape, which eventually became AOL. And didn't have the courage at that point. There were some of us that did, and they could see the future a bit, and they were courageous, right?
I wanted to ask you, because I feel like right now, all of my classmates that are pursuing some entrepreneurial thing are like clapped and everyone encourages them, but it's not the same in Spain or in Europe in general, where like someone that starts something and goes off the traditional path is looked as crazy. We're like, I know. So I wanted to ask you, like, how did you look to these people that were starting something completely new?
Carmen, it's so similar because in Australia, and still for the most part, we don't have a venture capital industry. Many of us that are looking for venture capital will go to the United States and tap on. We have private equity very well, and we have bits and pieces of venture capital. But if you're looking to start up, so at that point, number one, it just wasn't a path like it is at Stanford. In fact, you guys are flip-flopped in terms of, I'd say, around like 80% of our class went back to consulting. They went to investment banks. They went into the corporate positions that they were at. So, and then that it was 10 to 15%, maybe were going into startup. Whereas your class, because the technology, the path, even what you guys study in terms of startups and the exposure that you have is incredible, because that's been a path that's well honed. All the places on Sand Hill Road, they existed, and these are, for those of you listening, Sand Hill Road's known for its support of startups and adventures. But for us, at that time, there was only a few people that began to understand that infrastructure. So many of us didn't really have the courage to investigate that. It was unknown to us. And there's some really interesting reflections. And again, it'll be interesting to talk about your decision, Carmen, because for so many of us, we climbed the ladder of high school and then university, and then McKinsey's classic, because when you start as whatever you guys study. I remember we were called Analyst, yeah. Research analyst. And then the next stage is associate. And then, so the ladders are very clear. And then you go, oh, well, I've got to go to business school because that's the next rung. And I'll try to get into the best business school. And then for us in business school, it was fascinating. And I loved every moment. But I was like, well, the only ladder I know next is to go back to my consulting firm and eventually become partner. So it was a lot less, it was a lot more courage to get off that path or to get on that path for some people that had come from, say, military or other government or those sectors. So what I did is I went back. And so my, and it'll be interesting to talk about Spain too. Australia I wanted to go back, right? So my family, my partner at the time we got married was Australian. I love Sydney. It has always been my love. I don't see myself leaving Sydney at all. And I just had to go back for the opportunity to get paid. And so, I just didn't really see the opportunity. We had a few classes at Stanford that were at startups. I didn't even take those, Carmen. Loved finance. And I took way more finance classes because it really appealed to me in terms of logic and structure and numbers. And the funny thing is I never did anything with it. My fixed income and corporate finance professor was my favorite professor. He was a guy called Professor Van Horen, and in fact, you might even have a textbook by him. And he really encouraged me to go into investment banking. And some of me wishes, I don't know, whatever. So let's go back to your parallel experience. So you have an opportunity to go into this fashion. I'm sure
I love McKinsey. So I came to the GSB kind of knowing that I was going to go back, but I wanted to take advantage of these 2 years to explore other things. And that exploration completely blew my mind. I discovered that I came to the GSB with a very narrow definition of what success meant. And then after talking to all of my classmates and listening like their backgrounds and their incredible stories and knowing that the GSB admissions committee had thought that they were like very successful, I just started seeing a world of possibilities. So that really inspired me. And I was like, okay, things that I've always cared about are like social impact. And I've done like a lot of volunteering, but I never considered that within the core of my like career. And then another thing that I'm always end up like doing things in fashion design or appreciation of beauty in general, like art. But I've always thought that was very superficial and also kept it aside. So I was reflecting and I'm like, okay, I have this passion for like beauty, for social impact. Is there a way to combine them both and make a career out of it? So I was like dealing with these things. And then I met Lizzie, one of my classmates, and she was like going through a similar process. She had been working in private equity for so long and she was like completely done with that and wanted to pursue something related to the creative space. So we started talking and we decided to explore the idea of doing something in developing countries related to artisans. We saw a lot of skills, a lot of handcraft, a lot of ideas, traditions that we wanted to make them be able to pursue a life out of their art and not just sell things at a very like low price and like barely surviving when their things could be in the world. So like in the past, I had an NGO that was basically the whole intent of the NGO was to promote art in Malawi or to promote artisans from Malawi, by taking their art into the international sphere. So like international people could buy their art and the artists in Malawi could pursue a career in art instead of going to farming or something else.
So why Malawi? Why was that? How did you even get to that country?
So I went when I was in my undergrad. I went for more than a month to live there, and I just like found amazing things. I was like, my volunteering had nothing to do with art. It was like I was teaching and cooking at a school. But like I know when I was walking around, I saw so many like talented people that were selling their things on the street, and of course, no one had the money to buy it, and no one cared about Malawi, I think, is the second poorest country in the world. So art doesn't have a place there. And then I started like struggling, like why people that are so talented in something that is useless, quote unquote, cannot pursue that, and instead they have to dedicate their lives to something that they're not that skilled, and they're not like that work is not gonna fulfill them as much. So that's how it all started. But then because of COVID, we had to repurpose the whole NGO more to distribution of food. And I just like wanted to take the GSP to explore that angle again and see if there was something that could be done.
So you spent a month in Malawi and really lived, because many people often think, oh, what country am I going to serve? And they pick, they go on the map behind me and they go, oh, or the statistics that say, but you had on ground experience to work with that country and see it and then start thinking about how do I serve, but how do I make a business out of it? So you bring these ideas to Stanford and you think, okay, let's do that. And the 2 years at Stanford, unlike a lot of our experience, you guys were encouraged to take ideas and actually start implementing them. Is that right, Carmen?
Yes, there's a lot of classes that push you towards that. And also my classmate and I, we got awarded, do you know what is ID for Botachan? There are like these fellowships that they pay you a salary throughout the summer so that you can pursue your own idea instead of working for someone else. So that was great because we applied with more of a like Lizzie and I met around November MBA 1. We started chatting about all these things, but it wasn't a very high level. And like finally, throughout all these conversations and investigation, we narrowed it down and we wanted to do a marketplace between luxury brands that they need to innovate and they need to reimagine their supply chains due to all like China events, as we know, and emerging countries that they have the talent, but they don't have the people that want to buy it. So we just wanted to match them. And we got awarded. So we just got awarded these fellowships. So we spent the whole summer investigating that idea. Then we decided to pivot away from that. But it was an amazing experience that was like it was made possible by Stanford. And we spent the summer in India talking with a lot of manufacturers there, and also in Europe talking with the luxury brands. So it was incredible.
So how do you match the luxury brands with places in India? I don't like, are they artisans locally that could provide to the luxury brands? Like, give us an example.
For example, works with a lot of embroidery, comes from India. The silk, like that is an issue also, that sometimes India or China are associated with like low quality materials. But if you think back, India, like, the gems, the stones, the skill set of like just doing the actual embroidery. If you look at the traditional gowns, they are pieces of art. So that part of the whole Indian manufacturing landscape is where luxury brands are focused. But the thing is that after all our conversations with luxury brands, we realized that they don't love working with emerging countries because A, language barriers, B, ways of working. Like in some of these countries, if one day it starts raining, they will stop doing anything because there's no light at the factory, or the road gets collapsed, or someone dies and they all need to go to the funeral. So ways of working are not that stable or that foreseeable. And then finally, it's just that in fashion specifically, sometimes you just need to see and touch the fabric, the purse, the final details, and you cannot travel those long distances. So instead, luxury brands prefer to stick with their traditional artisans in Italy, in Spain, in France. So yes, we were exploring this whole thing to see if those barriers could be overcome by AI. But
so
like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Loewe, Burberry, things like that.
Like it's interesting. So what's the one that's been around? Well, Vuitton, right? So yeah, okay.
It's a big luxury group LVMH. Loewe is like also part of that group, but it's a Spanish one. probably that's what I mentioned it.
So what's fascinating, so were you still able to figure out a way to come up with those?
No, so we realized there's so many problems to fix the relationship between luxury brands and artisans that we had to start a step before that interaction, and we had to start with, like, the whole thing had to be reimagined, the whole production process. So we wanted to start at the very, very beginning, which is the design process. And then once we solved that, we wanted to like escalate until the whole process was solved through technology. So that is why in the end we're doing an AI agent to help designers. Yeah.
Tell me about the AI agent helping design. One of the driving interest I have to doing these conversations, amongst many other reflections I'm doing, the industrial age. We're talking about factories, just like we're thinking about in these third countries. And we're talking about industrial organization culture and industrial leadership, which a lot of our companies are still using, you know? And then when our class graduated, we were now looking at a different age. We didn't know that, but the information age, big data, to even get data, like Carmen, I remember racing before business school. I remember in Sydney, we were racing McKinsey to get to the library to get microfiche on, let's say, the latest retail world statistics on whatever client we were doing, or the latest, because we couldn't do data. I had to go to Indonesia once and look at the wastewater and water industry for joint ventures for one of the Australian companies. And so one of the questions we were investigating was, how large is the steel pipe industry in Indonesia? It's not like we could type up, how large is the Indonesia, which we could, because there was no information flowing in that. And the information age, interestingly, allowed our consulting industry to grow exponentially. Mm-hmm. So the McKinseys and the Boozers and the Bains and the BCGs, those are the top four, really grew because of the internet and information sharing. So for example, in Madrid, you guys could be working on a grocery industry, and you could say, let's get information and reports from Sydney because they just worked on a grocery. In fact, we could share the data. We could share the report. And that was the first time that could happen. And so that just grew, and big data came in, and the ability to share data. And there was a rise in the last, before AI started getting interesting, we had a rise in, we need more data analysts. We need more data analysts. We needed to get undergraduates to study statistics and to study that and to learn how to manipulate data. And so this was a different age. And so I've always been fascinated by culture and leadership. It wasn't even a topic that we really studied except for a class or two at Stanford, leadership. We had one leadership initiative, like you guys completely. You study it all the time. It influences and infiltrates. So anyway, the reason I was going there was because I'm fascinated with, the changes in not only the technology, but the way you guys think. I'm part of Generation X, just at the beginning of Generation X. I was very close to being a baby boomer. So now you guys are in a total generation. You have a different way of thinking, and you're facing a different, huge technology. And so here you are, and you're saying, all right, how do I use AI to look at this incredibly integrated social condition, integrated with a business? On one side, the luxury business, but on the other side, these local artisans. And there's no way, first of all, that we would have, some of us would have had the courage or the awareness that we would go to Malawi, or we could go to Vietnam, or we could go, because you've been to the Philippines as well, I saw, Carmen, figure out how to go to the local artisan. So back to that, I'm fascinated with how you guys think, and the travel that you do, and the awareness through the internet that you have of even beginning to to see opportunities, connecting the supply of local artisans and thinking about the challenges socially. I'm not sure we could have done that. Maybe a few, but I just don't know if that would be in our conscience.
It feels that at some point, my generation is too big picture oriented, and then you dream too big, and sometimes it's hard to know where to start, and then you just become overwhelmed. Like that's what happened to my friend and I. Like we were just, it was too big of a problem. We didn't know where to start. We decided to start at the very beginning of the whole process, but then we got far away from our like social impact intent just because we had to start somewhere. And then it was frustrating to have these big dreams and knowing that your day to day we were focusing on something that was not, it will get us there eventually, but we were way more impatient. We have like this big picture and the impatience, so it's a bad combination. But we keep, yes.
Okay, so you guys are at the cusp, aren't you, between Generation Y, Generation Z? Is that right? Or
Yeah,
we call it Z?
in particular, I'm Generation C, but yes.
Z. And it'd be interesting to reflect on the difference of that. But just like us, some of us were baby boomers in our class, and some of us were that. A global context. And Stanford type of people, not everybody, will have the invitation and the mindset to actually take on the world and see, okay, what are we seeing? You'll have the information to realize that there's huge inequality. We had a world, at that time, there was an author called Thomas Friedman. He still is a really interesting guy. He wrote The World is Flat. And we had a concept at Stanford. It was called globalization, and that was so interesting to us because all of a sudden we could start to access different parts. But anyway, so your generation, as you say, starts saying, well, how can we fix this whole supply chain, from Louis Vuitton all the way into Malawi? Let me take an example. So eBay. So I don't know Jeff Scholes, who was our classmate that founded it, along with the technologist. There were two people that founded it. There was a local San Francisco opportunity to create internet around trade, like going to a garage sale, and buying used products. So locally, they thought about technology solving a local exchange of goods that were normally sold through furniture, antique shops. Right? Yeah. So here you are, I can see why the overwhelm occurs. I can see that. When I talk to your classmates, I love the fact that they're asking questions like, how can AI help the healthcare industry? One of your classmates was saying, how can I influence the whole healthcare system of India? So your experience is, oh my, this is overwhelming. And so what do? You come back after that summer, and what's the decision making?
We come back, we realize that is a very big problem to solve. So we decided to solve it all, but one step at a time. So we start with the very first step, which are designers. We try to understand how designers work and like get into their brains and see how AI can help. Basically, like if we go back to the big picture, the intent was to make the relationships between the artisans and the luxury brands as frictionless as possible so that they can collaborate more, and therefore the artisans get more requests and they can like earn more money, have a better quality of living, no? But to do that, you need to have a playbook, a very standard way of working, and technology can help in that. But as of now, that is not the case. And that is why luxury brands from the West don't like collaborating with artisans in emerging countries, because it's just too slow. So if we go and revisit the whole process and every stakeholder at a time to make, there's like this program that is the backbone, like the technological backbone of this whole process that right now is very antiquated. Like it's very clunky, hard to use, especially for people in the creative world. They love tools that are creative as they are. And this technology was just like very, very chunky. Like no one really...
Give me an example. Like when you say this technology, pick part of the supply chain.
Imagine, like, as a designer, let's start again with the beginning. You would think that a designer like opens whatever tool they want, like it can be Figma or they can draw something on a white paper. But that is not the case. Like they rarely start with a white sheet of paper. They usually leverage something that's been done in the past in another collection, and they just adjust it. So the thing is that if the designer has not been working in the company for a long time, they may have no idea that that thing that they are about to create has already been done, or they can like save a lot of time by using something that is there in some book. So if they don't know it, or maybe if they know, but they just don't know where that file is located, they're going to spend so much time trying to figure it out, because the fashion world is not that technological savvy as you would imagine. So they have everything in papers, in folders. So you need to go to the office and like skim through all the folders that you can find until you finally get that dress that you were thinking of. So that's just a lot of waste of time. And instead, what they could do is like have AI. They can like describe to AI, okay, given the budget that I'm managing, given the providers that I need to work at, given the colors that are fashionable right now, giving the ethics of the aesthetics of the brand, and giving my idea, have we done something similar in the past? Yes, here.
I remember at the beginning of our internet experience, let me tell you, like I did the Indonesia study before business school. So no internet, forget it. Maybe local data. But what's interesting about what you're saying is we still, in order to use AI, you still need the information in it, right? So I see who are the best embroiderists in India. You're not going to know. You can't find a beautiful woman in a small Indian village. The other thing with fashion is, sure, you could crunch large pieces of data in terms of the consumer desire, what was last season, what the colors are. I remember the company, is Benetton still? Yeah. I remember we had a case study around Benetton and how they were able to change from standard, we're going to just do this color, these sizes. And they were able to get individual customer data so they could say, okay, well, what does Catherine need? And create that. Levi Strauss was starting to get individuals. Oh my gosh, how could you make a customer n equals 1 and instead of segmentation? We were just being able to segment in large groups of population in order to use data. Now you're using AI to do all that consolidation. So you don't have analysts like us crunching large spreadsheets that we designed, right? I remember doing segmentation for a bank product, a savings product for one of our banks. And I built this huge spreadsheet, the different populations based on buying behavior. We had a thing called conjoint analysis in marketing that looks at the characteristics of the buying part of it. And we were essentially able to create the data crunching ability, the sound. But now AI can do that. And what I'm hearing you say is, yes, it can. However, it needs to have access to those people who aren't providing AI.
Yep.
We don't even know they exist on ChatGPT, right? I don't know. Tell me about that.
Like amazing companies, like not even fashion, but amazing companies in the middle of nowhere that they don't even have a website. So, we were talking about AI, but like what the previous stage has not been completed yet. So how do we ensure that part of the world doesn't stay behind just because you're not fast enough to embrace all these things? But I don't know.
We can't access it. It's such a great case study, Carmen. You guys got to go back and write a case study because I'm excited as everybody else about the opportunities. I'm not frightened like a lot of people. I guess there could be a lot of fright. We were scared. Our generation were a little bit scared of the internet in some respects. Number one, we did not understand what it would do. I had a debating class at Stanford, and it was the debating class across the way. It was offered by an undergraduate class, and the debate that we were on is the internet going to, listen to this, impact retail? And we had pros and cons. And so here we are, Carmen, and we're asking, okay, how is AI? What I love about you is what you guys did is, how is AI going to take a social cause, and this is inequality between what you could say is third world parts of our thing, and how do you address that through commerce? And what does the technology do and what doesn't it do? Yep. And that's a huge question.
So we decided to focus only on designers. We go on a journey of interviewing a lot of them, understanding how they work. And we realized that they are very averse to technology. They think that AI is going to take over their jobs. So a lot of times they just didn't want to talk with us because they were, these people, they're creating my enemy. Why would we even talk with them and give them information when this is going to play against us? So it was a really hard job for us to convince them that we didn't want to touch the creative process. We only wanted to touch the technological backbone that would actually enable them to focus on creating instead of having to deal with all these bureaucratic things. Because we learned that a designer spends 3 hours a day doing things that, what I said before, digging through papers, trying to find the adequate reference, or talking with someone that didn't do the sample as they thought, realizing that their vision was not adequately transmitted because of not using a simple language or technological help. And they lost a lot of money and time in creating samples that were not aligned with their vision. So just teaching them that technology can serve as a language and as a time saver was really tough.
It's really interesting. So the essence of that, I think, for me, studying culture and leadership and how this changes is my own and your experience when I talk to your fellow students about how you use ChatGPT and the like in your studies might reflect that, but it actually is increasing my creativity. I am actually originating my ideas. And then number one, help, saying, where are these ideas being looked at by other students of culture? And even more interestingly, helping me consolidate my ideas and play them back and keep track of them. Because I might have a fragment of idea yesterday about something I'm writing a book now. I might have about this, and I might have a fragment of something. Carmen, you're inspiring me right now. Oh, wow. Okay. So I might capture that and it stays with me. And it might say, when you wrote that 5 months ago, that might work in this. That's crazy. That's really helping me. And so you have an interesting challenge as you look at the fashion designers to show them that this is possible. And I think that's going to apply to a lot of our industries. Yeah. So I don't know. So here you go. So you get to a certain point this year in your studies in second year, and you go, you know what? You want to go back to Spain, number one, which is interesting. A lot of your colleagues want to stay in the San Francisco area. So you're being pulled back to your country. How's that? Why is that, Carmen? What's the...
Honestly, I don't know. The thing is, I've always been a very adventurous person. I lived in Hong Kong, in Switzerland, in Ireland, in France, in the US, and I did all these volunteers for a lot of months in different countries. But for the first time, I feel that I need to go back home to regain energy, to align back with my roots, and then be ready for the next adventure. No, I took my favorite class at the GSV is this one that is called Finding Religious and Spiritual Meaning at Work. And it really made me think about what's important to you, how do you define success, what are your rules of the game? When you're about to die and you look back, what do you want to see? And I realized I want to see my family and my friends. I want to see a lot of love around me. And my life is in Spain. So even though I am always going to be seeking international adventures, I need to create these deep foundations in Spain so that I have a place to go back. I want my career path is already on track, but I don't want to lose sight of my personal project and get blinded.
I love that. Carmen, to even have that class in spirituality at the business school, that's huge. Elephant, I can't think of it. But anyway, and that is asking the really important questions. In the last podcast said, yeah, have all these adventures, do all this business, it's all interesting. But at the end of the day, ask yourself what you're asking yourself, Carmen. Where are my roots? Where am I going to spend the time with people that I will continue to nurture, building the relationship? So the call back to Spain, I'm so glad that you're listening to it, especially because you have had the adventures, right? And you can still have them. Yes. And you come back to your base. You come back to your base.
And I think it is really hard to listen to that call when everyone is fighting so hard to stay in the US. Everyone really, really wants, and they look at you and they ask you, like, are you crazy? Why are you going back? And like, well, Spain, thankfully, it's a great country and I have opportunities there. It's not like I'm coming from a town in the middle of Malawi, you know? But still, they look at you like, why would you let the US opportunity pass? But then you have to stay strong and say, like, well, this is what I want. Like, success for me means a lot of, like, I want to be successful in a lot of different dimensions, not only in one. So if this is the price that I have to pay, I am so willing to pay it because it's for my own happiness. So
how much does the current, and we don't have to take sides on the political spectrum, but the current political pressure on Harvard must be playing in the way you guys think. You guys, I say us too, international students, in other words. How's that infiltrating you guys at Stanford? How does that influence your ideas? Because this just happened, right? Yeah. So this is a new factor in the decision for international students and graduates to stay in the United States.
Especially for graduates. So everyone in my class is pretty scared.
Okay.
Because, you know, like, people want to get a job, especially in startups, and startups don't hire until like very soon to the start date. So it's around this time of the year. And because they're listening to all these news, they just don't want to take a bet on international students because they are like, why should I bet on you when I have this person from the US that may, like, they are going to stay and I don't know about you. So it's just like very uncertain. People are scared that they're not going to be able to stay in the US. And that is such a pity. I don't know. Because I had made my decision before, I'm not personally worried, but I'm very sad about everyone's feeling this uncertainty. And amazing people not getting the jobs that they want just because of this.
Well, I'm very, because our class, I don't know the statistics, but it felt like, let's just say what it felt like. So we had similar size, 300, I don't know, like you, like 300 plus students. And it felt like it was about 10 to 15% not American and not North American as well. So your statistics are way higher than that in terms of the international students.
It's around 60% are from the US and 40% are international.
There you go. So 40% not from the United States. And the richness that gives Stanford Business School of 300 people is extraordinary impact for the world, right? One of your colleagues is going back to Saudi Arabia, and I guarantee that he will have a huge influence on that country's 30-year vision. And the importance of that, not because, Carmen, we have to like take over Spain, you know, with our great Stanford brands. You know, I don't think I came to Australia, but the internationalism of the richness of the experience
Yeah, and even
It's just,
knowing that you have a home everywhere you go, like from the basic of that.
yeah, the callback to the country, I think, is so important these days. But the loss, I hope it's not the loss of the students and the ability to influence the U.S., one of the biggest industry or economy, and oftentimes the leading technology, is a worry. So let's hope that doesn't continue to persist. So you're going back to Spain. What your thoughts are, meaning that means. I'm so glad that your generation is asking that. Carmen, what was interesting is, let me tell you a little bit, because I don't usually talk that much, but about our 5th reunion, our 10th reunion, and maybe even when that started happening, people, our class would come back and talk about the successes, a little bit of failure, of how much money they raised and how big their companies were and how innovative and the experience of their jobs. I actually decided, I think it was, 20th reunion, I asked to speak. There's always 5 speakers. I asked to speak, and I decided to talk about midlife crisis. And it had nothing to do with my job. It had everything to do with the disasters of health disasters, mental health disasters, divorce disasters, challenges with children, and good things. And that was the first time that anybody actually spoke about career. And the number of people that came up to me that were just relieved to go, oh my God, I'm so glad you talked about it. And the funny thing is, in the 25th reunion, all of 5 speakers didn't speak about business at all.
Wow.
And it's interesting. And so it'll be interesting on the 30th reunion. I'm still fascinated with what you guys are thinking in the generation, not only in the business ideas and understanding, I don't know, example AI, example the thoughts about what the healthcare system looks like, the medical technology, et cetera, this whole thing about longevity, I'm still fascinated with that. And yet what you were saying gives me a great deal of hope, that the questions you're asking call back to Spain. The spiritual aspect calls you back. I love that. That gives me hope.
I cannot talk for my whole generation, but I do think that technology and AI have a role in that, because okay, let me see if this makes sense. Before, it was easier to get trapped and just like going to work and doing something, because it was like hard. It was hard to do it. And so you got trapped in the details, into like finalizing the model like to the best possible, whatever. And things took more time. But with technology, you get to see the big picture. You get to think more. So you need to understand where you're going, because the details of like are done by AI or by technology. So you need to be the bigger person here. You're not following what your boss is telling you to do. You have to own it. So when you start walking, you need to go you need to know where you're going, so that like starts making you think. And that is like at least how I started thinking about, like, okay, in the end, like when I die, what is the picture that I want to have painted? And then you start doing backward engineer till today.
You said something really cool that is important, that I just caught, that I want to play back. When we went, and I'll give you the example of the eBay, San Francisco, how do you make second used products available at a price at a market? And how do you make that retail? And then they grew out of San Francisco at more technology, not just used products. Amazon, same. It started with, okay, how do we make books available? He probably started in a local market. I don't know if that's the case. So it was incremental. Now, what's interesting is you guys have the ability to ask meaning, to look at a larger picture, which we just never would have. I'm exaggerating like crazy, but seeing the opportunity of technology to go back to meaning. So go back to, did you get to, well, you did in Malawi. Did you get to Indian villages as well?
In the Philippines as well. And the Philippines, I was like with creating a drug addiction rehabilitation program.
See, so when I went back, and even before business school with our consulting firm, we were looking at hospital effectiveness and efficiency. But we didn't, I didn't, other than getting the data, the benchmarking data of efficiency from other offices in Busan, I didn't step back and actually look at the healthcare system in general in Australia, in the world. It was quite around efficiency. We even use words like process and re-engineering. And so that's what's interesting about the shift to this new AI world. However, here's the thing. We need brains like you have. We need brains that are at the Stanford and Harvard to think systemically. And our education's not creating that. And that's what the thing is, Carmen. You have a mind that can do that. And the education allowed you to get that exposure, and the technology allowed you. You guys travel like we didn't travel like your generation. No way. I mean, going to the Philippines, you're crazy. We could only spend like, I don't know, a month with a Eurail pass, and we'd go to Madrid, but we wouldn't go to anything out of Madrid. Yeah. Going to Madrid was exotic, Anyway,
it's like more frictionless for us. So yes, no matter.
Much so. All right. So I could talk to you forever. As we come to a close, Carmen, so you're in your last 2 weeks. What is the essence of Stanford that you're going to take forward with you as you go back to Spain and you recreate your next stage of world? What's the essence of the last 2 years that you take back with you?
I think, as I said, the definition of success. Now I own it. It's what I want it to be. And like, I am going to hold myself accountable for my definition of success instead of following others.
I love that.
That for sure. Then the second, the risk-taking, the courage. Here, I've seen people that are not afraid of like dreaming bigger and making it happen. Like people in my class raising funds, is buying companies, and people that are like a couple of years older than I am, I would have never dreamt of that. Like, and not because I can't. It's just having the boldness to ask, believing in yourself in a way, like, I don't know. I'm just like, I am fascinated by that. And I want to be surrounded by these people and gain the courage that they have so that I also can do like amazing things.
Isn't that a phenomenal answer? Because here you are combining two sides of the equation, which is what is success? And you've given, you've had time, but also exposure to lots of cultures, lots of ideas, lots of philosophy as to what is the meaning. And you go, okay, but there's still courage that I can apply. And my wish for you is that you think of courage in your non-working life, because all of us, and even at 10 years old, 20 years old, will come up with challenges that are just unimaginable. The whole experience for me, not everybody has an opportunity to be in a marriage or have children, and maybe in a couple of years have grandchildren. Mm-hmm. With my daughter getting married, that's a huge milestone. Being a mother of a bride, you're kidding. Anyway, so the linking of those two ideas with the courage is the courage to try new ideas in your social work, to reach out to people that, like your drug addiction in the Philippines, to reach out to different parts of society, not necessarily to help them, which we love to do, but to be fascinated and to think about the mutual interest even around the corner in Madrid. Yeah. So let me end with this, because you prompted me to to end with this. This quote is from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And what's interesting about this quote is that it was originally written by one unknown woman. And it's not in the exact words, right? In her own words. Her name was Betty Stratton, I think. And he saw this and reformed the concept in his beautiful poetic language as he could. And this has happened many times in history. There's a quote that is ascribed to Nelson Mandela that was actually written by a woman called Marianne Williamson. And it happens. But anyway, the quote, interestingly enough, was put on a card that was given to me by my best friend in high school. And then the same exact card 4 years later was given to me by my college roommate. And it was interesting. And I keep this to my heart. So it's Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says, what is success? And it says, to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation and approbation of honest critics, to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give of oneself, whether it's to leave a better child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exultation. And this is my favorite part, and I always try to think of it, I forget it all the time in the daily life, is to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. Yeah. This is to have succeeded.
Yes, that last sentence, Mother Teresa says something very similar, and I just love it.
Thank you for joining us. For more insights and information, visit my website at katherinemclennan.com. That's spelled KATHARINEMCLENNAN.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the series so you know when the next episode will be, as we continue exchanging wisdom, connecting past, present, and future through the perspectives of Stanford MBA graduates of 1995 and 2025.